Most people believe that control is strength, that the more tightly you hold your life, the safer you will feel, that if you plan carefully enough, think far enough ahead, and manage every detail, anxiety will finally disappear. Yet, strangely, the opposite often happens. The more we try to control life, the more restless the mind becomes, the more tense the body feels, the more fragile our sense of peace grows. This raises a question that quietly troubles many people, even if they never say it out loud. Why does doing everything right still feel so exhausting? From the outside, control looks responsible. It looks disciplined. It looks like maturity. But from the inside, control often feels like constant vigilance, a mind that cannot rest, a nervous system that never fully relaxes, a quiet fear that if attention slips even for a moment, something will go wrong. This fear is not a personal failure. It is a deeply human response to uncertainty. Life, by its very nature, is unpredictable. Change is unavoidable. Loss cannot be scheduled. Outcomes refuse to obey our preferences, and yet the mind keeps trying. It tries to secure the future. It tries to prevent pain. It tries to guarantee happiness. In Buddhism and Zen thought, this effort is not judged as wrong or foolish. It is understood as natural, but misguided. The problem is not that we want stability. The problem is where we believe stability comes from. Many people assume peace arrives only when life is under control, when everything is clear, when nothing unexpected remains. But what if this assumption itself is the source of suffering? What if the very attempt to control life is what creates the anxiety we are trying to escape? This is not an abstract question. It shows up in everyday experiences. When you try to control your thoughts, they multiply. When you try to control other people, relationships tighten and strain. When you try to control outcomes, disappointment waits close behind. The more effort is applied, the more resistance appears. Zen teachings often point to a quiet paradox. Life does not respond well to force. This does not mean we should become passive. It does not mean we abandon responsibility or intention. It means there is a difference between wise action and compulsive control. Wise action moves with reality. Compulsive control tries to bend reality. One flows, the other fights. Most suffering begins not because something is happening, but because the mind insists it should not be happening. This insistence creates inner friction, and friction, sustained over time, becomes exhaustion. If you look closely, you may notice how often tension arises from sentences like, "This shouldn't be this way," "I need this to change," "I can't let this happen." These sentences feel protective, but they quietly signal resistance to what already is. Zen Buddhism does not ask you to like everything that happens. It asks you to see clearly where struggle is being added unnecessarily. Before we explore how to release control, we must first understand why control feels so necessary. Because without understanding its roots, any attempt to let go becomes another form of forcing. So the real inquiry begins here. What is it that you are trying to control? And why? Is it fear of uncertainty? Fear of loss? Fear of being hurt again? Many people spend their lives chasing things they believe will finally bring peace. A relationship that feels complete. A career that feels secure. A version of life where nothing important is missing. And yet, no matter how much effort they apply, peace often remains fragile, temporary, or distant. This creates a quiet frustration. People begin to wonder whether they are doing something wrong, whether they are not trying hard enough, whether they need to push more, plan better, or hold on tighter. From a Buddhist perspective, this frustration is not a sign of failure. It is a signal that effort has been misunderstood. Chasing itself is not the problem. The problem arises when chasing becomes the mind's primary way of dealing with uncertainty. When effort turns into a refusal to accept how life actually unfolds, the mind wants guarantees. It wants to know that its effort will be rewarded, that if it invests enough energy, time, and emotion, a specific outcome will arrive. This belief feels logical. It is reinforced by education, work culture, and social expectations. But life does not operate like a transaction. In lived experience, effort does not guarantee results. Sometimes things arrive easily, without much struggle. Other times, intense effort produces very little. And often, what finally arrives is not what the mind originally wanted. This gap between effort and outcome is where suffering quietly grows. When the mind believes that effort should control results, it becomes tense whenever reality does not cooperate. Waiting feels unbearable. Uncertainty feels threatening. Delay feels personal. The body responds immediately. The breath shortens. The chest tightens. Thoughts begin to race. Even when nothing objectively bad is happening, the nervous system enters a state of agitation. Buddhism points out that this agitation is not caused by the situation itself. It is caused by attachment to outcome. Attachment is often misunderstood as emotional dependence or obsession. But in Buddhist teaching, attachment is more subtle. It is the belief that your well-being depends on something arriving in a specific form at a specific time. When this belief is present, the present moment is never enough. It becomes merely a waiting room for a future that feels more important than what is happening now. This is why chasing is so exhausting. The mind is never where the body is. It lives one step ahead, anticipating, predicting, correcting. Zen teachings often describe this as trying to stand in front of life instead of walking with it. When you stand in front of life, you are constantly bracing. When you walk with it, movement feels natural. Many people confuse letting go with giving up. They imagine detachment as a loss of ambition or care. But this is not what Buddhism teaches. Detachment does not mean abandoning desire. It means releasing the belief that desire must be fulfilled on your terms for you to be at peace. There is a profound difference between intention and insistence. Intention says, "This matters to me." Insistence says, "This must happen now, or I will not be okay." Insistence creates suffering long before any outcome appears. You can see this clearly in everyday waiting. Waiting for someone to respond. Waiting for clarity about a decision. Waiting for life to change direction. The mind tightens around time itself. Time becomes an enemy, yet time is not working against you. It is simply unfolding according to conditions far more complex than personal preference. Buddhism emphasizes conditionality. Everything that arises does so because conditions allow it. When conditions are incomplete, forcing does not help. It only creates strain. This is why many things in life arrive when you stop interfering, not because effort disappears, but because resistance does. Resistance is the hidden factor most people overlook. They believe their struggle comes from not having what they want, but much of the pain comes from resisting the way life is moving right now. Resistance shows up as inner argument. This should not be happening. I should be further by now. This delay is unacceptable. These thoughts feel justified, but they quietly pull the mind out of alignment with reality. Zen teachings do not ask you to like delays or uncertainty. They ask you to stop fighting them internally. When internal fighting stops, energy is freed. That energy becomes available for clarity, learning, and appropriate action. This is where detachment begins to reveal its true function. Detachment creates space. Space allows perception. Perception allows wise response. Without space, effort becomes blind. It repeats the same strategies, hoping for a different result. Many people notice that the things they chased hardest either fell apart or felt empty when they finally arrived. This is not bad luck. It is a lesson about alignment. What is aligned does not require constant force to stay in place. This does not mean aligned things arrive without effort. It means the effort feels different. It feels steady rather than desperate, focused rather than frantic, alive rather than draining. The nervous system recognizes this difference immediately. When something is not meant to be forced, the body resists. When something is aligned, the body cooperates. Buddhism pays close attention to this bodily wisdom, not as superstition, but as direct experience. If you constantly feel tense, rushed, or afraid of losing something, it is worth asking whether effort has turned into attachment. Attachment narrows life. Detachment widens it. When attachment loosens, life does not collapse. It often becomes more responsive. New paths appear. Unexpected opportunities arise. Not because the universe is rewarding you, but because perception is no longer blocked by fixation. This is why Zen often says that when you stop chasing, things come. They come not because you deserve them, but because you are finally able to receive them. Receiving requires openness. Openness cannot coexist with desperation. This first step is not about changing behavior. It is about changing understanding, seeing clearly that chasing is often driven by fear, not love. That insistence creates suffering, not security. That timing cannot be controlled, only respected. This understanding does not immediately remove desire. It softens the grip around it, and that softening is where peace begins to appear. When the mind begins to loosen its grip on chasing, something else often rises to the surface: the desire to control. If chasing is the outward expression of fear, control is its inner architecture. It is the structure the mind builds to feel safe in an unpredictable world. Most people do not recognize how deeply control shapes their daily experience. It does not always appear as domination or rigidity. More often, it shows up as planning, organizing, optimizing, and constantly thinking ahead. These behaviors are socially praised, so their emotional cost remains hidden. Control promises relief. It tells the mind that if everything is managed carefully enough, uncertainty can be minimized. If risks are anticipated, mistakes avoided, and outcomes secured, peace will finally arrive. Yet this promise is quietly broken again and again. From a Buddhist perspective, control does not fail because it is poorly executed. It fails because it attempts something impossible. Life is not a fixed system that can be mastered. It is a living process shaped by countless conditions, most of which lie beyond personal influence. Trying to control what is inherently fluid creates tension by definition. The mind often responds to this tension by increasing effort. When things feel unstable, it thinks more, plans more, and monitors more closely. But this increased effort rarely brings ease. Instead, it produces a constant low-level stress that becomes part of everyday life. Many people mistake this stress for responsibility. They believe that if they stop controlling, something important will fall apart. This belief keeps the nervous system on high alert, even during moments that could otherwise feel peaceful. Buddhism points out that control is not the same as care. Care responds to what is happening now. Control tries to dictate what should happen next. This difference matters deeply. When you care, attention is present and flexible. When you control, attention becomes narrow and rigid. One listens, the other demands. You can feel this difference in the body. Care allows the breath to remain natural. Control subtly restricts it. Care softens the muscles. Control tightens them. Zen teachings often emphasize direct observation of these bodily signals because the body does not lie. It reacts immediately to mental strain, long before the mind admits it. The illusion of control becomes clearer when we look at how the mind relates to time. Control is always oriented toward the future. It tries to secure outcomes that have not yet arrived. The present moment becomes a means to an end, rather than a place to live. This creates a quiet dissatisfaction. Even when things are going well, the mind cannot fully enjoy them. It is already thinking about what must happen next to keep everything intact. In this way, control robs life of immediacy. Buddhist teachings describe this as living one step ahead of reality. The mind is never where the body is. It is always preparing, adjusting, or preventing. This creates a sense of being permanently unfinished. Many people live their entire lives in this state, believing it is normal. But when they pause long enough to notice, they often realize how tiring it is. Control also reinforces a particular sense of self. It positions the mind as the manager of life, the one responsible for holding everything together. This role can feel empowering at first, but it quickly becomes heavy. When the self believes it must control outcomes, Every disruption feels personal. Delays become failures. Uncertainty becomes threat. Change becomes danger. This is why letting go of control can feel frightening. It is not just the fear of chaos. It is the fear of losing a familiar identity. Buddhism does not ask you to abandon responsibility. It asks you to question the assumption that you are the sole architect of your life. Life unfolds through conditions. Some of those conditions involve your choices and actions. Many do not. When the mind ignores this, it takes on a burden it cannot carry. This burden shows up as chronic tension. Zen teachings offer a different understanding of effort. Effort is not eliminated. It is refined. Right effort does not attempt to dominate conditions. It cooperates with them. Cooperation requires sensitivity. Sensitivity requires openness. Openness cannot exist when the mind is rigid with control. This is why forcing often leads to resistance, both internally and externally. When you push against life, life pushes back, not out of malice, but because force disrupts balance. Balance is central in Buddhist practice. Balance does not mean passivity. It means responding appropriately to what is present. Control responds to imagined futures. Awareness responds to actual conditions. This distinction becomes clearer when we examine failure. When control is dominant, failure feels devastating. It threatens identity and self-worth. When awareness is present, failure becomes information, something to learn from, not something to defend against. This shift changes how life is experienced. Instead of asking, "How do I make sure this never happens again?" the mind begins to ask, "What can this teach me?" Learning replaces tension. Curiosity replaces fear. Many Zen stories point to moments when insight arises after effort collapses, not because collapse is ideal, but because it reveals the limits of control. When the mind finally admits it cannot manage everything, space opens. In that space, a quieter intelligence becomes visible, not the intelligence of strategy, but the intelligence of attunement. Attunement is the ability to sense when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain silent, when effort supports life and when it interferes. This intelligence cannot be accessed through control. It emerges when control relaxes. Relaxation here does not mean disengagement. It means releasing the internal argument with reality. When the argument stops, perception widens. Options appear that were previously invisible. This is why people often say that clarity comes when they stop forcing answers. It is not because answers magically appear, but because the noise blocking perception quiets down. The illusion of control convinces the mind that without constant management, nothing will function. But life has been functioning long before conscious control appeared. The heart beats, the lungs breathe, seasons change, growth occurs. Recognizing this does not make you irrelevant. It places you back into relationship with life rather than above it. From this perspective, detachment begins to make sense. Detachment is not withdrawal from life. It is withdrawal from the belief that life must obey your timeline. This withdrawal is not an act of will. It is a consequence of understanding. When the mind sees clearly that control creates strain, interest in forcing naturally decreases. This does not mean uncertainty disappears. It means uncertainty no longer needs to be eliminated to feel safe. Safety shifts from external predictability to internal flexibility. This flexibility is resilience. Resilient minds bend with change instead of breaking under it. They do not demand certainty before moving forward. They move with what is available. This is the ground from which trust begins to grow. Not blind trust in outcomes, but trust in the capacity to respond. When this trust deepens, control loosens, effort becomes cleaner, action becomes simpler, and life begins to feel less like a problem to solve and more like a process to participate in. This understanding prepares the way for the next step, seeing how timing itself cannot be commanded, only respected. And from there, detachment becomes not a concept, but a lived experience. So, one of the deepest sources of suffering lies in how the mind relates to timing, not what happens, but when it happens. The mind does not simply want things to arrive. It wants them to arrive now, or at least according to a schedule it feels comfortable with. When timing does not cooperate, discomfort arises immediately. Waiting feels heavy. Delay feels unfair. Uncertainty feels threatening. And so the mind begins to interfere. From a Buddhist perspective, this interference is one of the most misunderstood causes of suffering. People assume that the pain of waiting comes from not having what they want. But much of the pain comes from resisting the fact that the moment has not arrived yet. This resistance is subtle. It often appears as impatience, overthinking, or constant checking. Checking messages, checking signs, checking progress. The body stays tense, as if readiness alone could speed up time. Yet time does not respond to tension. Zen teachings remind us that timing is not something we control. It is something that emerges from conditions. When conditions are incomplete, no amount of force can bring the moment into existence. When conditions align, movement happens naturally. This truth is simple, but deeply uncomfortable for the mind. The mind wants to believe that effort can replace timing, that trying harder can override readiness, that intensity can compensate for conditions that are not yet in place. But this belief creates suffering long before any outcome is known. You can feel this clearly in moments of anticipation. The mind leans forward, living ahead of itself. The present moment becomes unbearable, not because it is painful, but because it is not the desired future. Buddhism describes this as living out of sync with reality. Reality unfolds one moment at a time. The mind races ahead. The gap between the two creates tension. This is why people often feel exhausted even when nothing difficult is happening. They are not tired from action. They are tired from anticipation. Anticipation pulls energy away from the present. It keeps the nervous system activated, waiting for something that has not yet arrived. Zen does not say that anticipation is wrong. It says that identification with anticipation creates suffering. When the mind becomes identified with a future moment, the present loses its value. Life feels like a hallway leading somewhere else. This is where attachment to timing becomes most visible. Attachment to timing says, I will be okay when this happens. Detachment says, I can meet this moment without postponing my well-being. This does not mean pretending everything is fine. It means not making peace conditional on the future. Many people fear that releasing attachment to timing will make them passive. They imagine that if they stop pushing, nothing will move. But this fear misunderstands how movement actually happens. Movement comes from readiness, not urgency. Urgency creates noise. Readiness creates clarity. When readiness is present, action feels appropriate. It does not feel forced or rushed. There is a sense of alignment between inner state and outer conditions. Zen teachings often use natural imagery to illustrate this. A fruit ripens when conditions allow. Pulling it early does not make it sweet. Waiting is not inaction. It is respect for process. Life works the same way. Many people notice that the most meaningful changes in their lives occurred when they stopped forcing outcomes. A relationship deepened after pressure was released. A decision became clear after overthinking stopped. An opportunity appeared when they stopped chasing it. These moments are not accidents. They reveal something about how timing operates. Timing is sensitive to interference. The more the mind insists, the less clearly it can perceive what is actually unfolding. Interference often comes from fear of missing out. Fear that if the moment is not seized immediately, it will disappear forever. This fear drives hurried decisions and unnecessary struggle. But what truly belongs in your life does not require panic to remain. This does not mean nothing can be lost. Loss is part of life. But panic does not prevent loss. It only adds suffering. Zen encourages a different relationship with uncertainty. Instead of trying to eliminate it, we learn to stay present within it. Staying present does not mean liking uncertainty. It means not turning uncertainty into an enemy. When uncertainty is no longer treated as a threat, the body relaxes. When the body relaxes, perception sharpens. When perception sharpens, timing becomes easier to sense. This is how wisdom operates in Buddhist teaching. Not as prediction, but as responsiveness. Responsiveness means meeting life where it is, not where you want it to be. Many people believe they are waiting for life to begin. But life is already happening. The waiting is something the mind is doing. Zen gently points this out. There is no separate moment when life suddenly becomes real. Reality is continuous. Only attention moves away. Attachment to timing pulls attention out of the present. Detachment returns it. This return does not solve every problem. It changes how problems are held. When you stop fighting timing, energy that was trapped in resistance becomes available. That energy can be used for learning, growth, and skillful action. Skillful action does not demand immediate results. It responds to what is possible now. This is why detachment is not laziness. It is precision. Precision requires patience. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active presence without interference. Zen practice cultivates this patience by teaching the mind to remain with what is, even when what is feels incomplete. Over time, this changes the relationship with desire. Desire becomes information rather than command. It signals direction without dictating speed. The mind learns to trust process over pressure. When this trust develops, something surprising happens. Life begins to feel less adversarial, less like a race against time. Moments arrive when they are ready. Decisions clarify when conditions mature. Relationships evolve when space is allowed. This does not make life predictable. It makes it workable. And workability is the foundation of peace. When timing is respected, detachment no longer feels like loss. It feels like relief. Relief from fighting moments that are not yet here. Relief from treating the present as a mistake. This understanding prepares the way for the next realization. That detachment does not remove effort, but transforms it. And that transformation is where genuine freedom begins to take shape. When detachment is misunderstood, it is often reduced to a surface idea. Stop caring. But Buddhist teaching points to something far more precise and far more compassionate. Detachment is not the absence of care. It is the absence of clinging. Clinging is care mixed with fear. Fear of loss. Fear of delay. Fear that if something does not happen in a certain way, life will collapse. This fear tightens the mind and hardens the heart. Detachment softens both. A detached mind can still love deeply. It can still pursue meaningful goals. What changes is not the direction of life, but the grip with which life is held. This difference is subtle, yet it changes everything. Clinging demands certainty. Detachment allows mystery. Clinging asks, will this work out? Detachment asks, how can I meet this moment well? One question narrows awareness, the other expands it. In Zen Buddhism, this shift is essential. As long as the mind is fixated on outcomes, it cannot fully engage with the process. It is always half elsewhere, negotiating with the future. This negotiation creates inner conflict. The body remains here, but the mind is constantly projecting forward. As a result, even success feels unstable because it is immediately followed by fear of loss. Many people experience this without realizing it. They achieve something they wanted, yet feel anxious instead of peaceful. The mind immediately moves to protecting what has been gained. This is not because the achievement was wrong. It is because clinging has replaced appreciation. Detachment restores appreciation by removing the need to possess. When something is not treated as something to hold on to, it can be fully experienced. The present moment opens. Zen teachings often emphasize this through ordinary activities. Drinking tea, walking, listening. Nothing extraordinary is required. What matters is the quality of attention. When attention is free from grasping, even simple moments feel complete. This completeness does not depend on circumstances. It arises from alignment with reality as it is. Clinging resists reality. Detachment cooperates with it. Cooperation does not mean agreement with everything that happens. It means recognizing what is already the case without adding mental struggle. This recognition has a calming effect on the nervous system. When the mind stops arguing with reality, the body begins to relax. From this relaxed state, clearer responses emerge. This is why Buddhist teachings describe detachment as a form of intelligence. It allows action without distortion. Distortion occurs when fear clouds perception. Fear exaggerates urgency, invents threats, and narrows options. Detachment removes fear from the driver's seat. This does not mean fear disappears entirely. Fear still arises, but it is no longer obeyed automatically. Zen practice trains this capacity, sitting with discomfort, observing thoughts without chasing them, allowing emotions to rise and fall without immediate reaction. Over time, the mind learns that it does not need to control every experience to survive. This learning is deeply liberating. Many people unknowingly live as if life is a constant emergency. Every decision feels urgent. Every delay feels dangerous. Every uncertainty feels like a personal failure. Detachment interrupts this pattern. It introduces a pause between stimulus and response. In that pause, wisdom can appear. Wisdom in Buddhism is not abstract knowledge. It is the ability to respond appropriately to conditions. Appropriateness requires sensitivity, not force. Force comes from fear. Sensitivity comes from presence. When detachment deepens, presence becomes more stable. The mind is no longer pulled constantly toward imagined futures or replayed pasts. This stability creates space for insight. Insight reveals that many struggles are self-generated, not the events themselves, but the resistance to them. This realization can be uncomfortable. It challenges long-held beliefs about control and effort. People often believe that constant striving is necessary to ensure safety. Zen gently questions this assumption. Is tension truly protecting you, or is it exhausting you? Is control creating security, or is it masking distrust? Detachment does not remove responsibility. It removes the illusion that control equals safety. When this illusion dissolves, responsibility becomes lighter, not heavier. Actions are taken because they are appropriate, not because they are driven by panic. This shift is especially important in relationships. Relationships suffer when clinging dominates. Expectations tighten. Fear of loss leads to over-monitoring, over-giving, or emotional withdrawal. Detachment allows love without possession. This does not mean indifference. It means allowing others to be who they are, rather than who we need them to be to feel secure. Such love is rare, but deeply healing. It creates space for authenticity. When people do not feel controlled, they naturally move closer. This pattern appears again and again in Buddhist stories. When the grip loosens, connection strengthens. The same principle applies to goals. When goals are pursued with desperation, creativity narrows. Mistakes feel catastrophic. Learning becomes difficult. Detachment allows engagement without self-attack. Failure becomes feedback, not identity. This makes long-term growth possible. Zen does not promise that detachment will give you everything you want. It promises that detachment will free you from suffering caused by wanting things to be different than they are. Freedom from this suffering does not make life perfect. It makes life workable. Workable life is not free from challenge, but it is free from unnecessary struggle. This is why detachment is central to peace. Peace is not the absence of movement, it is the absence of inner war. When the mind stops fighting reality, energy returns. That energy can be used for compassion, insight, and skillful action. Skillful action arises naturally when the mind is clear. Clarity comes from letting go of the need to secure outcomes. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive teaching of Buddhism, that release, not control, creates stability. At first, this feels risky. The mind fears that letting go will lead to chaos, but experience teaches otherwise. When clinging softens, life often becomes more coherent, not less. Opportunities align. Decisions feel more intuitive. The right amount of effort becomes obvious. This does not mean everything goes smoothly. It means difficulties are met with less resistance. Resistance amplifies pain. Acceptance reduces it. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means acknowledgement. Acknowledgement opens the door to change. Ironically, when reality is fully acknowledged, change becomes easier. This is why Zen emphasizes seeing clearly rather than fixing quickly. Seeing clearly requires stillness. Stillness is not passivity, it is the absence of mental noise. Detachment cultivates this stillness. From stillness, insight arises. From insight, appropriate action follows. This sequence cannot be reversed. Action without insight creates chaos. Insight without action stagnates. Detachment balances both. As life unfolds, moments arrive when effort is required. Detachment does not prevent effort. It ensures effort is not wasted. Effort aligned with timing feels fluid. Effort driven by fear feels heavy. The difference can be felt in the body. Zen invites you to trust this felt sense. When the body tightens, something is being forced. When the body remains open, action is likely aligned. This sensitivity develops with practice. Detachment is not achieved once and for all. It is practiced moment by moment. Each moment offers a choice: to grasp or to allow. Allowing does not guarantee outcomes. It guarantees presence. Presence is the ground from which peace grows. And peace, in Buddhist teaching, is not something that arrives later. It is something that becomes available now when the grip is released. As detachment deepens, a quiet shift begins to occur in how effort is experienced. Effort no longer feels like pushing against life, but like moving with it. This distinction is subtle, yet it marks a turning point in Buddhist practice. Most people are taught that effort must be tense to be effective. Strain is often mistaken for commitment. Exhaustion is mistaken for sincerity. When effort does not hurt, it is assumed to be insufficient. Buddhism challenges this belief directly. Effort, when aligned with reality, does not exhaust the mind. It steadies it. The Buddha described this as right effort, not because it produces immediate results, but because it is free from inner conflict. Right effort arises from understanding, not fear. Fear-driven effort is frantic. It seeks to control outcomes. It demands reassurance. It burns energy quickly and leaves little behind. Understanding-driven effort is calm. It responds to what is needed now. It conserves energy and allows continuity. This difference becomes obvious when the mind stops chasing certainty. Certainty is seductive because it promises relief. The mind believes that if it could just know how things will turn out, it could finally relax. But certainty is rarely available. And when it is temporary. Detachment teaches the mind to relax without certainty. This relaxation does not dull awareness, it sharpens it. When the mind is no longer preoccupied with securing the future, it becomes more attentive to the present. Subtle signals that were previously ignored begin to stand out. You notice when something feels forced. You notice when something feels natural. You notice when action arises from clarity rather than pressure. These signals guide effort more effectively than rigid plans. Zen teachings often emphasize this intuitive responsiveness. They describe a mind that moves like water, adjusting to the shape of circumstances without resistance. Water does not rush, yet it reaches everywhere. This imagery is not poetic decoration. It points to a functional quality of awareness. When the mind is flexible, effort becomes adaptive. It can increase or decrease as conditions change. It does not insist on a fixed pace. This adaptability is essential for long-term peace. Many people suffer because they apply the same intensity to every situation. They push hard when patience is needed. They wait passively when action is required. Detachment improves discernment. Discernment is the ability to recognize what kind of effort a moment calls for. Sometimes, effort means acting. Sometimes it means refraining. Sometimes it means letting things unfold. Without detachment, these distinctions blur. The mind assumes that doing more is always safer than doing less. This assumption leads to overexertion and frustration. Zen practice invites the opposite inquiry. What is the minimum effort required to respond skillfully right now? This question does not promote laziness. It promotes precision. Precision conserves energy and reduces unnecessary struggle. This is especially important in moments of emotional difficulty. When emotions arise, the untrained mind reacts automatically. It tries to suppress unpleasant feelings or amplify pleasant ones. Both reactions involve force. Detachment introduces space between emotion and response. In this space, effort can be applied wisely. You may choose to stay with the emotion, observe it, or gently redirect attention. None of these responses require suppression or indulgence. They require presence. Presence is effortful, but not exhausting. It asks for attention, not control. Over time, the mind learns that it can remain present even when experiences are uncomfortable. This realization reduces fear. Fear often drives excessive effort. When fear diminishes, effort naturally becomes lighter. This lightness does not mean disengagement. It means freedom from inner compulsion. Compulsion feels urgent and narrow. Freedom feels spacious and responsive. Buddhist teachings describe this freedom as non-striving, not because striving disappears, but because it is no longer driven by lack. Striving driven by lack says, I am not enough until this happens. Effort rooted in clarity says, this action is appropriate now. The first creates tension. The second creates alignment. Alignment feels calm, even when work is demanding. This is why monks and practitioners often appear serene even while engaged in disciplined practice. Their effort is not fighting against life. It is cooperating with it. Cooperation does not guarantee success. It guarantees integrity. Integrity is the alignment between intention, action, and awareness. When integrity is present, peace is not dependent on outcomes. Outcomes still matter, but they no longer define self-worth. This is a profound shift. Many people measure themselves by results. When results are favorable, they feel worthy. When results are unfavorable, they feel diminished. Detachment loosens this identification. You are no longer your successes or your failures. You are the awareness that engages with experience. This awareness remains intact regardless of outcomes. From this perspective, effort becomes an expression of care, not a bid for validation. You act because it is meaningful, not because you need the result to confirm your value. This distinction changes how life feels. Life becomes less like a test and more like a practice. Practice is ongoing. It does not end with a final score. Zen emphasizes practice over achievement for this reason. Achievement can create attachment. Practice cultivates presence. Presence allows learning even in difficulty. When mistakes occur, presence allows reflection instead of self-attack. When success occurs, presence allows appreciation without clinging. Both responses protect peace. This balance is fragile at first. The mind easily slips back into old patterns of grasping or avoidance. Detachment is therefore not a destination, but a training. Each moment offers a new opportunity to notice how effort is applied. Is it tight or relaxed? Is it driven by fear or guided by clarity? Is it resisting reality or responding to it? These questions are not meant to judge. They are meant to illuminate. Illumination reveals choice. Choice is freedom. When choice is available, effort becomes flexible. Flexible effort adapts. It does not insist. This flexibility is essential in a world that is constantly changing. Clinging to fixed strategies creates frustration. Detachment allows adjustment. Adjustment does not mean abandoning goals. It means allowing the path to change. Many people resist this because they equate change with failure. Zen reframes change as responsiveness. Responsiveness is a strength, not a weakness. A rigid mind breaks under pressure. A responsive mind bends and continues. Detachment cultivates this responsiveness by loosening the grip on how things must unfold. When the grip loosens, perception expands. You begin to see options that were previously invisible. You recognize when rest is needed. You recognize when effort can resume. This rhythm between rest and action is natural, but often ignored. Modern life glorifies constant motion. Buddhism restores balance. Balance does not eliminate effort. It sustains it. Sustained effort without burnout is only possible when detachment is present. This is why detachment is not withdrawal from life. It is the condition that allows full engagement without collapse. Engagement without collapse is freedom. Freedom does not mean absence of responsibility. It means absence of inner struggle against responsibility. Responsibilities are met as they arise, not anticipated with dread. Anticipation drains energy. Presence restores it. As this understanding matures, something becomes clear. Effort, aligned with detachment, feels lighter, but it is not weaker. It is stronger because it is sustainable. Sustainability is the quiet foundation of peace. Without it, even meaningful pursuits become sources of suffering. With it, even difficult paths can be walked with steadiness. This is the gift of detachment applied to effort. It does not remove challenges. It removes unnecessary weight. And with that weight removed, the mind becomes capable of something rare, steady engagement with life as it unfolds, without the constant need to control where it is going. As detachment becomes embodied rather than conceptual, a deeper layer of practice reveals itself. The relationship between detachment and identity. This is where Buddhist teaching moves beyond surface behavior and touches the root of suffering. Much of what the mind clings to is not external at all. It is internal. Stories about who we are, who we should be, who we fear becoming. Identity is one of the most persistent attachments. People often believe they are attached to outcomes, relationships, or circumstances. But beneath these attachments lies a more subtle grip, the need to protect a particular image of the self. This image may be positive or negative, successful or struggling, strong or wounded. It does not matter. As long as the mind insists on maintaining a fixed identity, suffering follows. Zen Buddhism points directly at this attachment. The self-image feels solid because it is constantly reinforced by thought. Thoughts narrate experience, labeling it in relation to me. Success becomes my success. Failure becomes my failure. Delay becomes something happening to me. Detachment interrupts this narrative. When detachment deepens, experiences are no longer immediately absorbed into identity. They are seen as events, not definitions. This shift is subtle, but profoundly liberating. Without detachment, every experience feels personal. Life becomes a series of judgments about worth, progress, and adequacy. With detachment, experiences are allowed to arise and pass without being fused with self-concept. This does not erase personality. It loosens fixation. Personality remains functional. Identity becomes flexible. Flexibility reduces fear. Fear often arises from the belief that certain experiences threaten who we are. If identity is rigid, any challenge feels existential. Detachment softens this rigidity. When the mind no longer clings to a fixed self-image, challenges lose their threatening quality. They become information rather than attacks. This is why detachment brings resilience. Resilience is not toughness. It is adaptability. Adaptability requires that the self is not overly defined. Zen teachings often describe this as emptiness, a term frequently misunderstood. Emptiness does not mean nothing exists. It means nothing exists independently or permanently. The self is included in this insight. The self is not a solid entity. It is a process. Seeing this clearly reduces attachment. When the self is seen as a process, experiences flow through without needing to be owned. Ownership creates burden. Flow creates ease. This does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means not equating responsibility with identity. You can act responsibly without defining yourself by outcomes. This distinction protects mental health. Many people suffer because they confuse what they do with who they are. When actions fail, identity collapses. Detachment separates these domains. You do what you can. You learn. You adjust. But you are not reduced to a single moment. This perspective is central to Buddhist peace. Peace does not come from perfect performance. It comes from freedom from self-judgment. Self-judgment is one of the most draining mental habits. It consumes attention and reinforces attachment. Detachment loosens self-judgment by weakening identification. When identification weakens, inner dialogue softens. The mind no longer needs to constantly explain itself. Silence appears. This silence is not emptiness in the sense of void. It is spaciousness. In this space, clarity arises naturally. Clarity reveals that much suffering is generated by trying to become someone rather than being present with what is. Trying to become someone requires comparison. Comparison fuels insecurity. Detachment dissolves comparison by removing the need to rank experiences. Experiences are no longer evaluated primarily by how they reflect on the self. They are met as they are. This is why detachment brings humility. Humility here does not mean lowering oneself. It means releasing the need to inflate or defend identity. A humble mind is relaxed. Relaxation allows learning. Learning without defensiveness accelerates growth. This growth is quieter than ambition-driven progress, but more stable. Stability is essential for long-term peace. Without stability, even moments of happiness feel fragile. Detachment stabilizes happiness by removing dependence on identity confirmation. You can enjoy success without clinging to it. You can endure failure without being crushed by it. This balance is rare, but trainable. Zen practice cultivates it by repeatedly returning attention to direct experience. Direct experience has no identity attached to it. Sensations, sounds, and movements simply occur. When attention rests here, identity loosens naturally. This does not require philosophical effort. It requires presence. Presence is the doorway to freedom. Freedom here does not mean doing whatever one wants. It means not being imprisoned by the self-image. The imprisoned self is constantly managing impressions. It worries about how it appears. It rehearses explanations. It anticipates judgment. Detachment frees energy previously consumed by this management. That energy becomes available for genuine connection. When identity loosens, listening improves. Empathy deepens. Relationships become less transactional. You no longer relate in order to confirm who you are. You relate to meet what is present. This quality of presence is deeply felt by others. It creates trust. Trust reduces the need for control. Control is often a compensation for insecurity. Detachment reduces insecurity by weakening identification. As identification weakens, the mind feels less threatened by uncertainty. Uncertainty is no longer interpreted as danger to the self. This is why detachment and trust are closely linked. Trust does not mean blind optimism. It means willingness to meet what arises without defensive contraction. This willingness transforms how life is experienced. Moments that once felt overwhelming become workable, not because circumstances change, but because the self is no longer at the center of every experience. This decentering is not loss, it is relief. Relief from constant self reference, relief from the pressure to maintain a narrative. Life becomes simpler. Simpler does not mean easier, it means clearer. Clarity allows appropriate response. Appropriate response is the essence of wisdom. Wisdom is not knowing what will happen, it is knowing how to meet what happens. Detachment makes this possible. Without detachment, responses are distorted by self protection. With detachment, responses are guided by understanding. This understanding is quiet. It does not announce itself, it simply acts. And when action arises from this place, it carries a quality of ease that no amount of striving can produce. This ease is not indifference, it is alignment. Alignment between experience, awareness, and response. This alignment is the lived expression of Buddhist freedom, and it sets the stage for an even deeper realization that detachment does not distance us from life, but allows us to participate in it more fully, without the constant weight of me standing in the way. As detachment matures, another quiet transformation takes place. The relationship with control begins to dissolve. This is one of the most difficult shifts for the mind, because control has long been mistaken for safety. From early life, control is taught as protection. Plan carefully, anticipate risks, manage outcomes. The mind learns to believe that if it can predict and regulate enough variables, suffering can be avoided. Buddhist teaching gently but firmly dismantles this illusion. Control does not prevent suffering, it only postpones facing uncertainty. Uncertainty is not a problem to be solved, it is a condition of existence. When this truth is resisted, the mind tightens. It scans constantly for threats. It stays vigilant, even in calm moments. This vigilance exhausts the nervous system. Detachment releases this exhaustion by loosening the grip on control. Letting go of control does not mean becoming careless. It means recognizing the limits of influence. There is a difference between influence and control. Influence operates within reality. Control attempts to override it. Zen Buddhism teaches respect for conditions. Everything arises from causes and conditions beyond individual command. Seeing this clearly reduces frustration. Much frustration arises from demanding that life conform to personal preference. Preference itself is not the problem. Insistence is. Insistence creates tension between what is and what should be. Detachment dissolves this tension by softening insistence. When insistence fades, something unexpected happens. Responsiveness improves. The mind becomes more sensitive to what can actually be done. Instead of forcing outcomes, it adjusts actions moment by moment. This adjustment feels intelligent rather than reactive. Reactive behavior is driven by fear. Responsive behavior is guided by awareness. Awareness perceives reality as it is, not as the mind wants it to be. This perception allows more effective engagement. Ironically, releasing control often increases effectiveness. When control is relaxed, perception widens. Opportunities previously overlooked become visible. Control narrows attention. Detachment expands it. This expansion is not passive. It sharpens discernment. Discernment allows choice without compulsion. Compulsion creates suffering because it removes flexibility. Flexibility is the foundation of resilience. Zen stories often illustrate this through paradox. The practitioner who stops chasing enlightenment becomes enlightened. The one who releases the need to win finds success. These stories are not moral lessons. They describe psychological mechanics. When the mind stops forcing, it stops interfering. Interference is subtle. It appears as overthinking, micromanaging, or constant correction. Interference assumes that life left alone will go wrong. This assumption is rarely questioned. Detachment questions it. What if life does not require constant supervision? What if allowing events to unfold does not equal failure? These questions unsettle the mind at first. The mind fears that without control, chaos will follow. But experience often reveals the opposite. When control relaxes, patterns stabilize. This does not mean problems disappear. It means responses become more coherent. Control often creates rigidity. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Detachment creates adaptability. Adaptability bends and recovers. Recovery is more important than prevention. No amount of control prevents all difficulty, but adaptability allows recovery without collapse. This insight transforms how difficulty is met. Difficulty is no longer interpreted as evidence of failure. It becomes part of process. Process-oriented living is central to Buddhist peace. Outcome-oriented living creates anxiety because outcomes are uncertain. Process-oriented living focuses on what is available now. What is available now is always actionable. This does not guarantee success. It guarantees engagement. Engagement without obsession. Obsessive control seeks certainty. Detachment accepts uncertainty. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It means cooperation with reality. Cooperation conserves energy. Energy conserved can be applied wisely. Wisdom emerges when energy is not wasted on resisting what cannot be changed. This is why detachment is deeply practical. It improves decision-making. When control dominates, decisions are rushed or rigid. Fear dictates speed. When detachment is present, decisions arise from clarity. Clarity is patient. Patient clarity allows timing to reveal itself. This connects directly to the earlier insight. If something is meant for you, it will arrive naturally. Naturally does not mean effortlessly. It means without distortion. Distortion occurs when control overrides perception. Perception is necessary for alignment. Alignment cannot be forced. It must be sensed. Detachment sharpens sensing. When sensing improves, action becomes appropriate. Appropriate action does not guarantee desired outcomes, but it minimizes unnecessary struggle. Struggle arises when effort is misaligned. Misalignment often comes from trying to control results instead of responding to conditions. Zen teaches trust in conditions. Trust does not mean expectation of favorable results. It means willingness to engage without coercion. This willingness reduces anxiety. Anxiety thrives on imagined futures. Detachment returns attention to the present. The present is manageable. Future scenarios are not. When attention rests in the present, the mind becomes steadier. Steadiness allows presence, even in uncertainty. Presence is the antidote to control. Control seeks to eliminate uncertainty. Presence allows it. Allowing uncertainty does not weaken resolve. It strengthens composure. Composure supports skillful action. Skillful action is calm, not frantic. Frantic action is a sign of fear, not commitment. Detachment removes fear from the center of decision-making. Fear may still arise, but it no longer commands behavior. This shift is profound. Life no longer feels like something that must be tightly managed. It feels like something that can be met. Meeting life requires courage. Courage here is not bravado. It is openness. Openness to not knowing. Openness to change. Openness to loss. This openness is not reckless. It is grounded. Grounding comes from awareness, not control. Awareness anchors the mind in reality. Reality is always unfolding. Trying to control unfolding is exhausting. Allowing unfolding is restful. Rest does not mean inactivity. It means absence of inner resistance. When resistance drops, effort becomes cleaner. Clean effort leaves no residue of resentment or regret. Regret often comes from forcing outcomes. Detachment reduces regret by aligning action with reality. Even when outcomes disappoint, regret is lighter because the action was appropriate. Appropriateness is peace. Peace does not depend on success. It depends on integrity. Integrity means acting in harmony with conditions. Control disrupts harmony. Detachment restores it. This restoration prepares the ground for the next insight. That surrender, when properly understood, is not weakness, but strength. And that strength reveals itself not through domination of life, but through intimate cooperation with it. As surrender begins to replace control, the mind encounters one of its deepest fears, the fear of losing agency. Many people believe that surrender means becoming powerless, passive, or irrelevant. Buddhist teaching dismantles this misunderstanding with careful precision. Surrender is not the abandonment of action. It is the abandonment of resistance. Resistance is what drains agency, not surrender. When the mind resists reality, it expends enormous energy fighting what already is. This energy is unavailable for meaningful response. The mind becomes reactive rather than responsive. Surrender returns energy to awareness. Offering no resistance does not mean approving of everything that happens. It means recognizing that reality does not need permission to exist. This recognition has a sobering effect on the ego. The ego wants to negotiate with reality. It wants to bargain, threaten, or plead. It believes that through sufficient intensity, outcomes can be altered. Surrender ends negotiation. This ending is not defeat. It is clarity. Clarity reveals where influence exists and where it does not. Without surrender, the mind confuses influence with control. It pushes where patience is required and waits where action is needed. Surrender corrects this confusion. When resistance falls away, perception sharpens. You begin to see what is actually being asked of you in each moment. Sometimes the request is to act. Sometimes it is to wait. Sometimes it is to endure. Endurance is one of the most misunderstood capacities in modern life. Endurance is not passive suffering. It is the ability to remain present without collapse. Collapse occurs when resistance overwhelms the nervous system. Surrender stabilizes the nervous system by removing unnecessary struggle. This stabilization creates a quiet strength. Quiet strength does not announce itself. It does not rush. It does not demand recognition. It simply remains. Buddhist teachings often refer to this as equanimity. Equanimity is the capacity to remain balanced amid change. Change is constant. Imbalance comes from fighting this fact. Surrender restores balance by aligning the mind with impermanence. Impermanence is not a threat. It is a law. Everything changes. Clinging to permanence creates fear. Accepting change creates resilience. Resilience allows participation without attachment. Participation without attachment is freedom. Freedom here does not mean independence from conditions. It means freedom from inner resistance to conditions. This freedom feels expansive. Life no longer feels like a series of obstacles. It feels like a flow of experiences to be met. Meeting experiences requires openness. Openness allows vulnerability. Vulnerability is often feared because it exposes uncertainty. But vulnerability without resistance is strength. It allows adaptation. Rigid defenses break. Open structures bend. Zen Buddhism emphasizes this through the image of bamboo. Bamboo bends in strong winds, but does not break. The human mind can learn this flexibility. Surrender teaches it. When surrender becomes embodied, emotional reactions change. Emotions still arise. Joy, sadness, anger, fear. But they are no longer treated as commands. They are seen as weather passing through awareness. Awareness remains unchanged. This recognition reduces emotional reactivity. Reduced reactivity allows space. Space allows choice. Choice restores agency. This is the paradox. Surrender increases agency by removing compulsion. Compulsion narrows action. Choice expands it. Surrender removes the pressure to act immediately. Immediate action is often fear-driven. Fear-driven action seeks relief, not wisdom. Wisdom-driven action arises when the mind is calm. Calmness does not eliminate urgency. It clarifies it. True urgency feels steady, not frantic. Surrender helps distinguish between false urgency and genuine necessity. False urgency is loud. Genuine necessity is quiet. Quiet signals are easy to miss when the mind is resisting. Resistance creates noise. Surrender reduces noise. With less noise, discernment improves. Discernment allows the mind to recognize when something is meant to be pursued and when it is meant to be released. Release is not loss when it aligns with reality. Holding on past the appropriate moment creates pain. Letting go at the right time creates relief. Timing becomes clearer when surrender is present. Surrender respects timing. It does not rush it. It does not delay it unnecessarily. It meets timing as it unfolds. This meeting requires trust. Trust does not mean certainty of outcome. It means confidence in the ability to respond. Confidence in response reduces fear of the unknown. Unknown does not disappear. Fear does. When fear diminishes, curiosity arises. Curiosity replaces anxiety. Curiosity engages with life openly. This engagement feels lighter. Life still contains difficulty, but difficulty is no longer interpreted as personal failure. Failure is reframed as information. Information supports learning. Learning strengthens wisdom. Wisdom deepens peace. Peace is not passive comfort. It is grounded stability. Grounded stability allows endurance without bitterness. Bitterness arises when effort feels wasted. Surrender reframes effort. Effort is no longer measured solely by results. It is measured by alignment. Aligned effort feels meaningful regardless of outcome. Meaningfulness sustains motivation. Motivation driven by fear exhausts. Motivation rooted in meaning endures. Surrender nurtures this enduring motivation. It removes the constant demand for validation. Validation seeking ties worth to outcomes. Surrender unties this knot. Worth becomes inherent, not earned. This understanding is subtle but transformative. When worth is no longer conditional, pressure drops. Pressure distorts perception. Without pressure, perception clarifies. Clarified perception supports appropriate action. Appropriate action strengthens trust. Trust reinforces surrender. This creates a self-supporting cycle. Surrender is no longer something you do. It becomes something you live. Life is no longer approached as a problem to solve, but as a process to participate in. Participation without resistance is joy. Joy here is not excitement. It is ease. Ease does not remove seriousness. It removes heaviness. Heaviness comes from fighting life. Surrender ends the fight. Ending the fight does not mean retreating. It means standing fully present. Presence is the deepest form of courage. Courage does not eliminate fear. It moves without being governed by it. Surrender frees courage from fear. This freedom allows life to unfold naturally. Naturally does not mean predictably. It means without interference. Interference distorts. Surrender clarifies. This clarity prepares the mind for the next realization. That surrender, detachment, and trust converge into a single lived insight. That life, when met without resistance, reveals a quiet intelligence guiding its unfolding. As trust begins to stabilize surrender, a subtle but profound shift occurs in how the mind relates to effort and expectation. Expectation quietly dissolves, not because hope is abandoned, but because the need for guarantees loses its grip. Expectation is often mistaken for optimism. In reality, expectation is a demand disguised as hope. It says, "This must turn out a certain way for me to be at peace." Buddhist teaching exposes this demand gently. Peace that depends on outcomes is fragile. It breaks the moment life deviates from the script. Trust, by contrast, does not script life. It prepares the mind to meet whatever appears. This preparation is not intellectual. It is embodied. When trust is present, the body relaxes even in uncertainty. The breath softens. The nervous system settles. From this settled state, perception becomes clearer. Clear perception reveals a truth the mind often resists. Most suffering comes not from what happens, but from how tightly we expect things to happen. Expectation narrows attention to a single imagined future. Everything else becomes a distraction or a threat. Trust widens attention. When attention widens, alternatives become visible. Possibilities that were previously dismissed appear. The mind becomes creative rather than defensive. Defensiveness blocks learning. Creativity invites it. This is why trust is essential for growth. Growth requires entering the unknown. Expectation tries to control the unknown. Trust allows exploration. Exploration does not guarantee success. It guarantees engagement. Engagement keeps life fluid. Fluidity reduces fear. Fear thrives in rigidity. When the mind locks onto a single outcome, anything else feels catastrophic. Detachment loosens this lock. With detachment, outcomes become events, not verdicts. This shift changes emotional responses. Disappointment still arises when things do not go as hoped. But disappointment is lighter than despair. It does not carry the weight of self-blame or existential threat. Despair arises when expectation collapses. Trust prevents collapse by removing the structure that collapses. This does not mean becoming indifferent. It means becoming resilient. Resilience is the ability to remain present after disappointment. Presence after disappointment is rare, but transformative. Most people immediately retreat into stories when disappointment occurs. Stories of failure, stories of unfairness, stories of inadequacy. Detachment interrupts these stories. Without immediate storytelling, emotion is allowed to move through the body naturally. Emotion, when not resisted or dramatized, completes itself. Completion restores equilibrium. Equilibrium supports wisdom. Wisdom does not eliminate desire. It places desire in context. Desire becomes a direction, not a demand. Direction can be adjusted. Demand cannot. This flexibility reduces suffering. When something does not arrive, trust allows you to ask a different question. Instead of, "Why didn't this happen?" the mind asks, "What is being asked of me now?" This question keeps attention in the present. The present is the only place where response is possible. Expectation pulls attention into the future. Regret pulls it into the past. Trust anchors attention in the now. Now is where life unfolds. When attention stays here, life feels participatory rather than confrontational. Confrontation arises when the mind believes life is withholding something. Trust dissolves this belief. Life is not withholding, it is unfolding. Unfolding includes delay, redirection, and sometimes loss. Loss is inevitable. Suffering from loss is optional. Suffering arises when loss is interpreted as meaninglessness. Trust allows loss to be integrated rather than resisted. Integration does not mean liking loss. It means allowing it to reshape understanding. Understanding deepens compassion. Compassion for self and others grows when expectations soften. Expectations often create invisible pressure on others. They are expected to behave in certain ways to validate our hopes. Trust releases this pressure. Relationships become lighter. When people are not required to fulfill expectations, authenticity emerges. Authenticity strengthens connection. Connection does not depend on control. It depends on presence. Presence becomes possible when expectation loosens. This pattern repeats across all areas of life. Work becomes less about proving worth and more about contributing skillfully. Creativity flows more easily when outcomes are not micromanaged. Decisions become clearer when fear of making the wrong choice fades. Trust does not remove responsibility, it clarifies it. Responsibility shifts from guaranteeing results to responding appropriately. Appropriate response depends on awareness. Awareness thrives in a relaxed mind. Relaxation is not passivity. It is openness without tension. Tension distorts perception. Relaxation sharpens it. This is why trust feels like relief. Relief from constant internal negotiation. Negotiation with life drains energy. Trust conserves it. Energy conserved becomes available for presence. Presence supports insight. Insight reveals patterns previously hidden by anxiety. Anxiety narrows vision. Trust widens it. With wider vision, timing becomes more intelligible. You begin to sense when to move and when to wait. This sensing cannot be forced. Forcing disrupts sensitivity. Trust restores it. Sensitivity allows alignment. Alignment feels like being in the right place at the right time, not because everything works out, but because effort feels appropriate. Appropriateness is peace. Peace does not mean absence of effort. It means absence of inner conflict. Inner conflict arises when expectation fights reality. Trust ends this fight. Ending the fight does not end engagement. It deepens it. Engagement without conflict is sustainable. Sustainability matters more than intensity. Intense bursts of effort, driven by expectation, lead to burnout. Steady engagement, driven by trust, leads to continuity. Continuity allows long-term growth. Growth unfolds naturally when not rushed. Rushing compresses experience. Learning is lost. Trust allows learning to complete. Completion brings confidence. Confidence here is not bravado. It is quiet assurance. Assurance that whatever arises can be met. This assurance reduces fear of the unknown. Unknown becomes interesting rather than threatening. Interest replaces anxiety. Interest invites curiosity. Curiosity keeps the mind alive. A living mind is flexible. Flexibility supports adaptation. Adaptation is survival with grace. Grace arises when the mind is not at war with reality. Trust makes peace possible. Peace makes wisdom accessible. Wisdom reveals that what is meant for you does not require force to arrive. It arrives through alignment, not insistence. Insistence blocks alignment. Trust restores it. This restoration is not dramatic. It is quiet. Quiet shifts are the most enduring. They do not depend on external confirmation. They stabilize internally. Internal stability allows life to unfold without constant interference. And as this stability deepens, another insight begins to emerge. That trust is not blind faith in outcomes, but confidence in awareness itself. The awareness that remains capable no matter what arrives. Thus, as confidence in awareness itself deepens, the mind begins to release one of its most persistent habits, the need to interpret everything immediately. Interpretation feels useful because it gives the illusion of understanding. In reality, it often distances us from direct experience. The mind rushes to explain before it has fully seen. Buddhist teaching invites a different posture. Instead of asking, "What does this mean for me?" it gently asks, "What is actually happening right now?" This shift may appear small, but it transforms the quality of attention. Immediate interpretation compresses experience into familiar categories. It labels, judges, and concludes. Presence, by contrast, allows experience to unfold without premature closure. Detachment supports this openness. When detachment is present, experiences are not immediately turned into stories. They are allowed to exist as sensations, emotions, and events before being named. This delay creates space. Space is essential for wisdom. Without space, reaction dominates. Reaction is fast, but shallow. Wisdom is slower, but deeper. The modern mind fears slowness because it equates speed with competence. Zen Buddhism challenges this assumption. Speed often reflects anxiety, not clarity. Clarity emerges when the mind is unhurried. Unhurried awareness can perceive subtleties that rushed attention misses. Subtleties matter because life rarely announces its direction loudly. Guidance appears quietly through small shifts in feeling, timing, and circumstance. When interpretation rushes ahead, these signals are ignored. Detachment slows the process enough for perception to register. This does not mean refusing interpretation entirely. It means allowing experience to be primary and interpretation secondary. Primary experience grounds understanding. Understanding grounded in experience is stable. Understanding based on speculation is fragile. Fragility increases anxiety. Anxiety feeds the urge to interpret. This cycle keeps the mind restless. Detachment breaks the cycle by tolerating not knowing. Not knowing is uncomfortable for the mind because it threatens its sense of control. But not knowing is also fertile. Fertility here means openness to discovery. Discovery requires patience. Patience is not waiting for something else to happen. It is staying with what is happening without demand. This quality of patience is central to Buddhist peace. Peace is not achieved by resolving every question. It emerges when the mind stops needing immediate answers. Immediate answers often oversimplify complex realities. Complexity requires humility. Humility allows learning. Learning deepens wisdom. Wisdom reduces suffering. This sequence unfolds naturally when interpretation relaxes. When interpretation dominates, the mind becomes opinionated. It decides too quickly what things mean and how they should be handled. This rigidity increases conflict, both internal and external. Detachment softens rigidity by loosening attachment to conclusions. Conclusions can still be reached, but they are held lightly. Holding lightly does not mean indecision. It means flexibility. Flexibility allows revision. Revision is necessary because reality changes. A mind that cannot revise suffers when reality shifts. Detachment allows revision without self-attack. You can update understanding without feeling threatened. This is especially important in emotionally charged situations. When emotions arise, interpretation often escalates them. A sensation becomes a story. A story becomes an identity. An identity becomes a conflict. Detachment interrupts this escalation. You notice sensation without immediately turning it into narrative. Without narrative, emotion has room to move and complete itself. Completion restores balance. Balance supports clarity. Clarity reveals appropriate response. Response replaces reaction. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. Choice is freedom. Freedom does not mean unlimited options. It means freedom from compulsion. Compulsion arises when interpretation locks experience into a single meaning. Detachment unlocks meaning. Multiple interpretations become possible. Possibility reduces fear. Fear narrows interpretation to worst-case scenarios. Detachment widens perspective. With widened perspective, life feels less threatening. Threat perception activates survival patterns. Survival patterns prioritize speed over accuracy. Accuracy requires calm. Calm emerges when the mind trusts awareness. Trust in awareness allows experiences to be met without rushing to conclusions. This trust is not passive, it is attentive. Attentiveness notices details without clinging. Clinging to details creates obsession. Attending to details creates understanding. Understanding without obsession is rare, but transformative. It allows learning without anxiety. Anxiety often masquerades as diligence. People believe that constant analysis protects them. In reality, constant analysis often disconnects them from direct experience. Direct experience carries information analysis cannot provide. Bodily sensations, emotional tone, and intuitive signals guide action more effectively than abstract reasoning alone. Detachment allows these signals to be heard. Interpretation often drowns them out. When interpretation pauses, intuition surfaces. Intuition here is not mystical. It is embodied intelligence. Embodied intelligence integrates information faster than conscious thought. It recognizes patterns holistically. This recognition supports timely action. Timely action feels natural. Natural action does not require excessive justification. Justification often signals insecurity. Detachment reduces insecurity by weakening identification with being right. Being right is less important than being responsive. Responsiveness requires openness. Openness tolerates ambiguity. Ambiguity frightens the control-oriented mind, but ambiguity is the space where new understanding emerges. Without ambiguity, growth stagnates. Detachment allows ambiguity to exist without panic. This allowance creates psychological safety. Safety allows exploration. Exploration reveals options previously unseen. Options reduce desperation. Desperation drives poor decisions. Detachment protects decision-making by removing desperation. Decisions made without desperation feel cleaner. Even when they lead to difficulty, regret is lighter because the decision was made with presence. Presence leaves no residue of self-betrayal. Self-betrayal occurs when decisions are rushed or fear-driven. Detachment aligns decisions with values rather than pressure. Values guide action more reliably than predictions. Predictions are often wrong. Values remain relevant regardless of outcome. This stability anchors the mind. Anchored minds weather change more gracefully. Grace is not elegance, it is steadiness. Steadiness arises when interpretation does not run ahead of experience. When the mind stays with what is unfolding, effort aligns naturally. Alignment reduces friction. Friction creates exhaustion. Detachment reduces friction by allowing experience to lead. This does not mean surrendering agency. It means cooperating with reality. Cooperation requires listening. Listening requires silence. Silence here does not mean absence of sound. It means absence of mental noise. Mental noise comes from constant interpretation. Detachment quiets this noise. In quiet, life speaks clearly, not in words, but in movement, timing, and feeling. Learning to hear this language takes practice. Practice requires patience. Patience grows from trust. Trust in awareness supports patience. Patience allows understanding to mature. Mature understanding does not rush to conclude. It remains open. This openness prepares the ground for the next realization that when interpretation relaxes, meaning reveals itself naturally without force, and life begins to feel less like a puzzle to solve and more like a path to walk. As meaning begins to reveal itself without force, the mind encounters a quieter, more grounded form of confidence. This confidence is not built on certainty or prediction. It arises from familiarity with impermanence. Impermanence, when resisted, creates anxiety. When understood, it creates ease. Most suffering around the future comes from the desire for permanence. The mind wants assurances that what is good will last and what is painful will end quickly. Life does not operate this way. Buddhist teaching does not offer false comfort. It offers clarity. Everything changes, not eventually, constantly. When this truth is fought, the mind tightens. When it is accepted, the mind relaxes. Relaxation does not come from liking impermanence. It comes from no longer arguing with it. This argument often happens silently. Thoughts insist that something should stay the same, that this moment should hold, that this feeling should remain. Clinging to moments is subtle. The mind tries to freeze experience, to capture it, to preserve it through memory or anticipation. But frozen moments become burdens. Detachment allows moments to pass without loss. Passing does not erase meaning, it deepens it. Meaning is not created by duration, it is created by presence. A moment fully lived does not need to last forever to matter. Zen teachings emphasize this through attention to ordinary activities: eating, walking, breathing. Nothing is meant to be extraordinary. What matters is complete engagement. Complete engagement does not cling. Clinging fragments attention. When attention fragments, experience loses richness. Detachment restores wholeness by allowing attention to rest fully in the present. This resting feels unfamiliar at first. The mind is used to leaning forward or backward, anticipating or regretting. Resting here feels exposed, but this exposure is where peace begins. Peace does not come from securing the future. It comes from intimacy with the present. Intimacy here does not mean emotional intensity. It means closeness without avoidance. Avoidance often hides behind distraction. Distraction feels harmless, but it reinforces the belief that the present is insufficient. Detachment reveals that insufficiency is a mental story, not a fact. When the mind stops chasing elsewhere, presence becomes satisfying, not euphoric, stable. Stability allows deeper appreciation. Appreciation does not cling, it notices and releases. This rhythm of noticing and releasing aligns with impermanence. Alignment removes resistance. Resistance amplifies pain. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. This teaching is often repeated, but rarely understood. Pain is sensation. Suffering is mental struggle against sensation. Detachment does not remove pain, it removes struggle. When pain arises, detachment allows it to be felt without additional commentary. Commentary often escalates pain into suffering. Suffering drains energy. Energy drained cannot be used for healing or insight. Detachment conserves energy by simplifying experience. Simplicity does not mean dullness, it means clarity. Clear experience is easier to work with. Working with experience rather than against it is the essence of Buddhist practice. This applies not only to pain, but also to pleasure. Pleasure is often clung to because the mind fears its loss. Clinging to pleasure creates anxiety, even while pleasure is present. Detachment allows pleasure to be enjoyed without fear. Enjoyment without fear is deeper. Fear of loss diminishes enjoyment. This is why many people feel anxious, even in good moments. They are already anticipating the end. Detachment keeps attention here. Here is where life is happening. Life does not happen in memory or expectation. Those are mental constructions. Constructed life feels thinner than lived life. Detachment returns thickness to experience. Thickness means richness, texture, depth. Depth comes from presence. Presence grows with trust. Trust in impermanence is counterintuitive. The mind assumes impermanence threatens safety. In reality, impermanence ensures renewal. Without impermanence, growth would stop. Relationships would stagnate. Learning would end. Impermanence keeps life dynamic. Detachment allows participation in this dynamism without fear. Fear arises when the mind seeks permanence in what cannot provide it. This seeking is exhausting. Detachment ends the search, not by giving up on meaning, but by finding meaning in process. Process does not require guarantees. Process requires engagement. Engagement without clinging is freedom. Freedom here is not independence from life. It is harmony with it. Harmony does not mean agreement with everything that happens. It means not resisting the nature of change. When resistance fades, the mind becomes resilient. Resilience is not endurance through force. It is flexibility through understanding. Understanding impermanence allows adaptation. Adaptation reduces shock. Shock occurs when expectations are rigid. Rigid expectations break when reality shifts. Detachment keeps expectations flexible. Flexibility reduces shock. Reduced shock allows faster recovery. Recovery preserves well-being. Well-being is not constant pleasure. It is balance. Balance arises when extremes are avoided. Clinging and aversion are extremes. Detachment is the middle way. The middle way does not eliminate desire or aversion. It prevents them from dominating behavior. Behavior guided by balance is skillful. Skillful behavior reduces regret. Regret often arises from acting under pressure. Pressure comes from resisting impermanence. Detachment releases pressure. Released pressure creates ease. Ease supports wise action. Wise action aligns with timing. Timing cannot be controlled. It can be respected. Respecting timing requires patience. Patience grows from understanding impermanence. When you know everything changes, waiting becomes less threatening. Waiting becomes part of process, not a mistake. This reframe reduces frustration. Frustration comes from believing something is wrong. Often, nothing is wrong. Something is simply not ready. Detachment recognizes readiness. Readiness cannot be forced. Forcing creates distortion. Distortion leads to misaligned action. Detachment prevents misalignment. Aligned action feels natural. Natural does not mean effortless. It means unforced. Unforced effort is sustainable. Sustainable effort supports long-term peace. Peace does not arrive suddenly. It accumulates quietly. Quiet accumulation goes unnoticed until turmoil no longer dominates. This quiet shift is the fruit of detachment practiced over time. It does not announce itself. It simply stabilizes. Stability allows life to be lived more fully, not because problems disappear, but because the mind no longer collapses under change. This prepares the way for the next realization that impermanence, when fully accepted, transforms fear of loss into gratitude for presence, and life begins to feel less like something slipping away and more like something continuously offered. As gratitude begins to replace fear of loss, the mind undergoes another quiet reorientation. Gratitude here is not a practiced emotion or a forced attitude. It arises naturally when the present moment is no longer treated as something fragile or insufficient. Fear of loss assumes that what is valuable is slipping away. Gratitude recognizes that what is valuable is already here. This recognition does not deny impermanence. It is born from it. When the mind truly understands that nothing can be held permanently, each moment is received more fully. Attention becomes tender. Awareness sharpens. Experience feels intimate rather than rushed. Intimacy with life does not require intensity. It requires presence without defense. Defense is often subtle. It appears as distraction, numbness, or constant busyness. These habits protect the mind from vulnerability, but they also block appreciation. Detachment removes the need for defense. When the mind is no longer guarding against loss, it opens. Opening allows gratitude to emerge spontaneously. This gratitude is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not demand expression. It simply colors experience with warmth. Warmth stabilizes the nervous system. A stabilized nervous system perceives reality more accurately. Accuracy reduces fear. Fear distorts perception by exaggerating threat and minimizing resources. Gratitude corrects this distortion by revealing sufficiency. Sufficiency does not mean abundance. It means enoughness. Enoughness calms the craving mind. Craving thrives on comparison. Gratitude dissolves comparison by focusing attention on what is already present. When attention rests here, desire softens. Softened desire does not disappear. It transforms. Desire becomes appreciation in motion. Rather than chasing what is missing, energy moves toward caring for what exists. This shift is profound. Life no longer feels like a deficit to be corrected. It feels like a gift to be stewarded. Stewardship requires attentiveness. Attentiveness grows naturally when appreciation replaces anxiety. Anxious minds rush. Appreciative minds linger. Lingering deepens experience. Deepened experience reveals nuance. Nuance enriches understanding. Understanding supports wise action. Wise action nourishes peace. This cycle unfolds without force. Force disrupts gratitude. Gratitude cannot be commanded. It appears when the mind stops insisting on more. Insistence creates dissatisfaction, even in abundance. Detachment removes insistence. Without insistence, the present moment becomes enough. Enoughness reduces internal pressure. Pressure often manifests as self-criticism. The mind judges itself for not having enough, doing enough, being enough. Gratitude interrupts this cycle by shifting focus from lack to presence. Presence does not compare. Comparison fuels insecurity. Insecurity feeds striving. Striving exhausts. Detachment ends the exhaustion by removing the belief that worth must be earned through accumulation. Worth becomes inherent. Inherent worth stabilizes identity. Stable identity is less reactive. Reactivity disrupts gratitude. Gratitude thrives in steadiness. Steadiness allows emotions to move naturally. Emotions are no longer suppressed or indulged. They are acknowledged. Acknowledgement without fixation allows emotions to complete. Completion restores balance. Balanced minds perceive value more clearly. Value becomes visible in ordinary moments. Simple acts feel meaningful. Meaning is no longer postponed. Postponement assumes fulfillment lies elsewhere. Gratitude anchors fulfillment here. Here is not static. Here changes constantly. Gratitude adapts with change. This adaptability prevents clinging. Clinging to gratitude itself becomes unnecessary. Gratitude flows. Flow replaces fixation. Fixation creates tension. Flow creates ease. Ease supports generosity. Generosity arises naturally when scarcity thinking dissolves. Scarcity thinking says there is not enough time, love, or opportunity. Gratitude reveals abundance within limitation. Abundance here is not excess. It is richness of experience. Richness emerges when attention is unfragmented. Fragmentation comes from chasing. Chasing interrupts appreciation. Detachment ends chasing. Without chasing, attention gathers. Gathered attention feels whole. Wholeness brings contentment. Contentment does not eliminate ambition. It contextualizes it. Ambition guided by gratitude is patient. Patient ambition does not sacrifice peace. Sacrificing peace for future reward creates suffering. Gratitude keeps peace intact. Peace does not stop progress. It supports it. Progress built on peace is sustainable. Sustainable progress does not demand constant urgency. Urgency often masks fear. Fear diminishes gratitude. Gratitude restores trust. Trust reduces urgency. Reduced urgency allows discernment. Discernment recognizes what truly matters. What truly matters is often simple. Simplicity is undervalued in a culture that equates complexity with importance. Zen Buddhism restores simplicity to its rightful place. Simplicity is not lack, it is clarity. Clear minds appreciate without grasping. Grasping corrupts gratitude. Gratitude thrives when hands are open. Open hands receive without needing to hold. Holding creates tension. Open hands allow flow. Flow is life. Life experienced as flow feels supportive rather than adversarial. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes workable. Workability reduces despair. Despair arises when the mind believes nothing is enough. Gratitude counters this belief directly. Enoughness becomes experiential, not theoretical. Experience of enoughness calms craving. Calm craving reduces suffering. Suffering is not eliminated, it is softened. Softened suffering is easier to meet. Meeting suffering without resistance allows compassion to arise. Compassion extends gratitude outward. Gratitude and compassion reinforce each other. Together, they deepen connection. Connection reduces isolation. Isolation intensifies suffering. Detachment reduces isolation by dissolving self-centered narratives. Narratives often block gratitude. When stories quiet, experience speaks. Experience speaks in sensation, emotion, and presence. Listening to experience nurtures gratitude. Listening requires silence. Silence emerges when striving quiets. Quiet striving allows awareness to rest. Resting awareness perceives beauty without effort. Beauty here is not aesthetic. It is experiential harmony. Harmony arises when mind and reality are not at odds. Detachment reconciles them. Reconciliation produces peace. Peace allows gratitude to become a stable orientation rather than a fleeting emotion. This orientation changes how life is lived. Life becomes something to receive rather than something to conquer. Receiving does not imply passivity. It implies openness. Openness invites participation. Participation grounded in gratitude is joyful. Joy here is not excitement. It is gentle satisfaction. Gentle satisfaction does not cling. It appreciates and releases. This rhythm is natural. When followed, life feels less like a race against loss and more like an unfolding gift. And as this understanding settles, another insight begins to form. That gratitude, when rooted in detachment, becomes a quiet strength capable of carrying the heart through uncertainty without bitterness or fear. A. As gratitude matures into quiet strength, the heart begins to experience a deeper form of freedom. Freedom from resentment. Resentment is one of the most corrosive inner states, yet it often goes unnoticed because it disguises itself as justification. Resentment feels reasonable. It tells a story of being wronged, delayed, overlooked, or treated unfairly. The mind clings to this story as proof of moral clarity. But resentment does not clarify. It binds. It binds attention to the past. It keeps the nervous system activated. It drains energy that could be used for presence and growth. Buddhist teaching approaches resentment with compassion rather than condemnation. Resentment arises when expectation meets disappointment and refuses to release. Detachment dissolves resentment not by denying harm, but by releasing the need to keep the wound alive. Keeping wounds alive feels protective. The mind believes that remembering pain prevents it from happening again, but memory without wisdom becomes fixation. Fixation freezes perception. Frozen perception cannot adapt. Adaptation requires movement. Detachment allows movement by softening the grip on narrative. Narrative is the structure that sustains resentment. The story repeats. What should have happened? What did not? Who is responsible? This repetition reinforces identity. Identity formed around injury becomes rigid. Rigidity amplifies suffering. Detachment loosens identity. When identity loosens, resentment loses its anchor. This does not mean injustice is ignored. It means injustice is not allowed to define the self. Defining the self through harm grants harm ongoing power. Detachment withdraws that power. This withdrawal feels threatening at first. The mind fears that releasing resentment equals surrendering self-respect. But self-respect does not require hostility. It requires boundaries. Boundaries can exist without resentment. Resentment is an emotional excess, not a boundary. Boundaries protect present well-being. Resentment replays past injury. Detachment preserves boundaries while dissolving excess. This distinction is crucial. Many people hold on to resentment because they believe it safeguards dignity. In reality, resentment erodes dignity by tethering self-worth to past events. Detachment restores dignity by grounding worth in presence rather than history. History informs. It does not imprison. Imprisonment occurs when the mind cannot let events complete. Completion requires acceptance. Acceptance does not mean agreement. It means recognizing that what happened cannot be changed. Resistance to this fact prolongs suffering. Detachment ends resistance. Ending resistance allows energy to return. Returned energy supports clarity. Clarity reveals choices previously obscured by emotional charge. One such choice is forgiveness. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. It is not absolution. It is not forgetting. It is not reconciliation. Forgiveness is the decision to stop carrying the burden of resentment. This decision benefits the one who forgives, regardless of the other's behavior. Detachment makes forgiveness possible by loosening attachment to narrative. Without narrative, emotion loses fuel. Emotion may still arise, but it no longer dominates. Dominance creates distortion. Detachment restores proportion. Proportion allows perspective. Perspective reveals that holding resentment often harms the holder more than the target. This realization is not moral. It is practical. Buddhism is pragmatic in this way. It asks, does this mental state reduce suffering or increase it? Resentment increases suffering. Detachment reduces it. This reduction is not immediate. It unfolds gradually. Gradual release is safer than forced letting go. Forcing release creates suppression. Suppression traps emotion. Detachment allows emotion to be felt without fixation. Feeling without fixation allows completion. Completion brings relief. Relief creates space. Space allows compassion. Compassion here is not sentimentality. It is understanding of human limitation. Understanding does not excuse harm. It contextualizes it. Contextualization reduces personalization. Personalization intensifies resentment. Detachment depersonalizes experience. Events are no longer interpreted solely through the lens of me. This decentering weakens resentment. Weak resentment dissolves. Dissolution feels like lightness. Lightness does not mean vulnerability disappears. It means weight is removed. Carrying resentment is heavy. Many people do not realize how much energy it consumes until it is released. Release reveals energy previously unavailable. This energy can be directed toward growth. Growth requires forward attention. Resentment anchors attention backward. Detachment reorients attention forward. Forward. Attention does not erase memory. It reframes it. Memory becomes information, not identity. This reframing protects peace. Peace does not require a painless past. It requires freedom from past domination. Detachment grants this freedom. Freedom does not deny suffering. It integrates it. Integrated suffering becomes wisdom. Wisdom informs future choices. This is the constructive function of pain. Pain teaches when it is not clung to. Clinging turns pain into trauma. Detachment transforms pain into insight. Insight reduces fear of repetition. Fear often sustains resentment. The mind believes that resentment guards against being hurt again, but resentment blinds perception. Clear perception is better protection. Detachment sharpens perception. Sharp perception recognizes warning signs without emotional distortion. Distortion exaggerates threat. Detachment moderates perception. Moderation prevents overreaction. Overreaction escalates conflict. Detachment de-escalates. De-escalation supports peace. Peace is not avoidance. It is stability. Stability allows firm action without hostility. Hostility undermines effectiveness. Action driven by resentment often misses its mark. Action guided by clarity is precise. Precision minimizes harm. Minimized harm reduces regret. Regret often fuels further resentment. Detachment breaks this cycle. Breaking the cycle is liberation. Liberation is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is felt as a decrease in internal noise. Noise comes from unresolved stories. Detachment quiets stories. Quiet allows awareness to rest. Rested awareness responds wisely. Wise response builds trust. Trust reduces defensiveness. Reduced defensiveness supports openness. Openness allows healing. Healing does not erase scars. It integrates them. Integrated scars do not ache constantly. They inform without controlling. This is maturity. Maturity in Buddhist teaching is not accumulation of knowledge. It is reduction of reactivity. Reduced reactivity equals freedom. Freedom allows engagement with life without constant self-protection. Self-protection often manifests as resentment. Detachment removes the need for constant defense. Defense relaxes. Relaxation restores humanity. Humanity connects. Connection heals isolation. Isolation intensifies resentment. Detachment reconnects. This reconnection is internal first. Internal peace reflects outward. Others sense it. Interactions soften. Softened interactions reduce conflict. Reduced conflict supports peace. Peace deepens gratitude. Gratitude reinforces detachment. This reciprocal relationship stabilizes the mind. Stabilized minds experience fewer extremes. Extremes exhaust. Balance sustains. Sustained balance is freedom. Freedom from resentment is one of the clearest signs that detachment has taken root. And as this freedom settles, another realization quietly emerges that releasing resentment does not weaken the heart, but frees it to love and engage without the shadow of past wounds dictating the shape of the present. Hey, as resentment fades and the heart regains its capacity to remain open, a deeper form of intimacy with life becomes possible. This intimacy is not emotional exposure or constant vulnerability. It is a steady willingness to meet experience without armor. Armor once felt necessary. It was built from past disappointments, betrayals, and unmet expectations. Over time, the mind learned to protect itself by tightening, withdrawing, or preemptively judging. Detachment gently removes this armor, not by force, but by showing that it is no longer needed. When resentment dissolves, the threat it was guarding against loses its immediacy. The nervous system relaxes. The body feels safer. From this safety, openness arises naturally. Openness is not naivete. It is discernment without fear. Fear clouds discernment. It causes the mind to overestimate danger and underestimate resilience. Detachment corrects this imbalance. With detachment, the mind no longer assumes that openness will inevitably lead to harm. It recognizes that harm is possible, but survivable. Survivability changes everything. When the mind trusts its capacity to recover, it no longer needs to close itself off. This trust is not confidence in outcomes. It is confidence in awareness and adaptability. Adaptability allows intimacy without attachment. Intimacy without attachment is rare, yet deeply liberating. Attachment demands that intimacy provides security. It expects others, situations, or moments to stabilize identity. Detachment releases this demand. When intimacy is not burdened by expectation, it becomes spacious. Spacious intimacy allows connection without possession. Possession suffocates connection. Many relationships deteriorate not from lack of love, but from excessive need. Need tightens, tightness repels, detachment softens need, softened need invites presence. Presence allows genuine meeting. Meeting without agenda is intimacy. This intimacy does not promise permanence. It offers reality. Reality is dynamic. Dynamic connection requires flexibility. Flexibility emerges when fear of loss diminishes. Loss is inevitable. Fear of loss is optional. Detachment removes the optional suffering. Suffering arises when the mind demands that connection last unchanged. Change does not negate meaning. Meaning is created through participation, not preservation. Detachment allows participation to be wholehearted. Wholehearted participation does not cling. Clinging fractures attention. When attention is fractured, connection feels incomplete. Detachment restores wholeness by allowing attention to rest fully in the encounter. Encounter here is not limited to people. It includes moments, activities, and experiences. Work, conversation, silence, movement, all become sites of intimacy. Intimacy with life replaces the search for fulfillment elsewhere. Fulfillment is no longer postponed. Postponement assumes something is missing. Detachment reveals sufficiency. Sufficiency relaxes striving. Relaxed striving becomes engagement. Engagement without desperation feels alive. Life regains texture. Texture is lost when the mind is preoccupied with protection. Protection narrows focus. Narrow focus misses nuance. Nuance enriches experience. Rich experience supports peace. Peace does not dull intensity. It refines it. Refined intensity is sustainable. Sustainable intensity supports long-term connection. Connection sustained over time builds trust. Trust reduces fear. Reduced fear allows deeper openness. This openness is not indiscriminate. Detachment sharpens discernment. Discernment recognizes when to open and when to pause. Pause is not withdrawal, it is attentiveness. Attentiveness senses readiness. Readiness cannot be forced. Forcing intimacy creates discomfort. Detachment respects timing. Timing governs depth. Depth emerges when conditions align. Alignment is subtle. It is felt rather than calculated. Feeling requires sensitivity. Sensitivity develops when defenses relax. Relaxed defenses do not mean lack of boundaries. Boundaries remain, but they are flexible rather than rigid. Rigid boundaries isolate. Flexible boundaries connect. Connection does not mean enmeshment. Detachment prevents enmeshment by maintaining awareness. Awareness observes closeness without losing center. Losing center creates anxiety. Anxiety disrupts intimacy. Detachment maintains center. Center here is not ego, it is presence. Presence anchors connection. Anchored connection feels safe. Safety allows truth. Truth deepens intimacy. Truth does not mean harsh honesty. It means alignment between inner experience and outer expression. Alignment reduces internal conflict. Conflict disrupts connection. Detachment reduces conflict by releasing the need to be defended. Defense often hides fear. Fear dissolves in presence. Presence tolerates vulnerability. Vulnerability here is openness to uncertainty. Uncertainty is inherent in all connection. Attempting to eliminate uncertainty destroys intimacy. Detachment accepts uncertainty. Acceptance allows curiosity. Curiosity keeps connection alive. Without curiosity, relationships stagnate. Stagnation breeds dissatisfaction. Detachment prevents stagnation by allowing change. Change renews connection. Renewal does not erase history. It refreshes engagement. Engagement without clinging sustains interest. Interest without fear feels playful. Playfulness is often lost in adulthood due to fear of loss. Detachment restores playfulness. Playfulness lightens interaction. Lightness reduces conflict. Reduced conflict preserves energy. Energy can then be directed toward creativity. Creativity flourishes in openness. Openness invites expression. Expression without fear strengthens connection. Fearful expression censors authenticity. Detachment removes censorship. Authenticity emerges naturally. Authenticity does not demand acceptance. It simply appears. Appearing without demand is freedom. Freedom in connection is rare. Most people oscillate between clinging and withdrawal. Detachment stabilizes the middle ground. This middle ground is spacious. Spaciousness allows intimacy without suffocation. Suffocation occurs when expectations are heavy. Expectations burden connection. Detachment lightens expectation. Lightened expectation creates room. Room allows growth. Growth keeps connection dynamic. Dynamic connection supports joy. Joy here is quiet. It is felt as ease, not excitement. Ease allows sustained closeness. Sustained closeness builds trust. Trust reduces vigilance. Vigilance exhausts. Detachment allows rest within connection. Rest does not mean disengagement. It means absence of inner tension. Tension blocks intimacy. Detachment dissolves tension. As tension dissolves, connection becomes less effortful. Effortlessness does not imply neglect. It implies alignment. Aligned connection feels natural. Natural does not mean permanent. It means appropriate. Appropriateness respects impermanence. Impermanence does not threaten intimacy. It gives it depth. Knowing moments pass encourages presence. Presence deepens experience. Deepened experience becomes memory without clinging. Memory informs without binding. Binding creates fear. Detachment unbinds. Unbinding frees connection from past constraints. This freedom is subtle. It is felt as openness without anxiety. As this openness stabilizes, the heart learns something essential. Intimacy does not require possession, and closeness does not require control. Life can be met fully, loved deeply, and released gently without diminishing its meaning. As intimacy with life becomes steady and unforced, the final realization of detachment quietly reveals itself. Detachment is no longer something practiced. It becomes the natural way awareness meets experience. At this stage, the mind stops asking whether it is doing detachment correctly. That question itself dissolves. What remains is a simple, grounded presence that does not interfere with life's movement. Life is no longer something to manage. It is something to accompany. This shift is subtle but unmistakable. The sense of being in opposition to life fades. There is no longer a feeling of standing outside events, trying to control their direction or defend against their impact. Awareness moves with what arises, neither rushing ahead nor lagging behind. This is where the phrase, "if it's meant for you, it will arrive naturally," stops being an idea and becomes lived experience. Naturally does not mean effortlessly. It means without inner resistance. Resistance once shaped every encounter. Even pleasant moments carried tension because the mind feared their loss. Even difficult moments carried panic because the mind feared being overwhelmed. Detachment dissolves both fears. Fear of loss fades because nothing is being possessed. Fear of overwhelm fades because awareness trusts its capacity to meet whatever arises. This trust is not conceptual. It is embodied. The body no longer braces constantly. The breath deepens. The nervous system settles. From this state, attention becomes fluid. Fluid attention adapts. Adaptation replaces control. Control once seemed necessary because life felt dangerous. Adaptation feels sufficient because life is no longer interpreted as an enemy. This does not mean life stops presenting challenges. It means challenges are met without collapse. Collapse happens when the mind believes something should not be happening. Detachment removes this belief. Events are no longer evaluated primarily as obstacles or rewards. They are recognized as expressions of conditions unfolding. Conditions change. Awareness remains. This stability of awareness is the quiet ground of peace. Peace here is not emotional numbness. It is steadiness. Steadiness allows engagement without exhaustion. Exhaustion came from fighting what could not be controlled. Detachment ends the fight. Ending the fight does not end effort. It clarifies it. Effort becomes responsive rather than compulsive. Responsive effort arises from seeing what is needed now. Compulsive effort arises from fear of what might happen later. Fear of the future weakens as trust In awareness strengthens, the future no longer feels like a threat that must be secured in advance. It feels like an unfolding that can be met. This changes how desire is experienced. Desire no longer commands urgency. It signals interest. Interest guides attention gently. When interest is met with presence, fulfillment arises in the process rather than being postponed to an outcome. This fulfillment is quiet. It does not depend on achievement. It depends on alignment. Alignment between experience, awareness, and response. When alignment is present, life feels coherent. Coherence reduces anxiety. Anxiety once dominated because the mind was constantly negotiating with imagined futures. Detachment brings attention home. Home is not a place. It is presence. Presence does not eliminate pain. It eliminates unnecessary suffering. Suffering arose from resistance, expectation, and identity fixation. Detachment loosens all three. Identity becomes flexible. Expectations become light. Resistance dissolves. What remains is responsiveness. Responsiveness allows appropriate action. Appropriate action leaves little residue. Residue is regret, resentment, or self-blame. Without residue, the mind rests more easily. Rest does not mean withdrawal. It means absence of inner noise. Noise once came from constant self-reference. Detachment decentered the self. Life is no longer interpreted primarily through me. This decentering is not loss. It is relief. Relief from constant self-monitoring. Relief from needing life to validate identity. Validation is no longer sought externally. Worth is not negotiated. It is assumed. This assumption stabilizes confidence. Confidence here is not bravado. It is quiet assurance. Assurance that awareness can meet life as it unfolds. With this assurance, attachment loosens naturally. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Nothing needs to be held. Holding and pushing both create tension. Detachment allows letting be. Letting be does not mean indifference. It means allowing phenomena to arise and pass without interference. Interference once felt like care. Now care expresses itself as presence. Presence listens. Listening perceives subtle cues. These cues guide timing. Timing is no longer forced. Action happens when readiness appears. Readiness is sensed, not decided. This sensing feels intuitive. Intuition here is not mystical. It is embodied intelligence. Embodied intelligence integrates experience faster than thought. It responds appropriately. Appropriate responses feel simple. Simplicity is often overlooked because the mind equates complexity with depth. Zen reveals depth through simplicity. Simplicity is not reduction. It is clarity. Clear minds see what matters. What matters is often quiet. Quiet matters are easy to miss when the mind is loud. Detachment quiets the mind. In quiet, life speaks, not in words, in movement, feeling, and timing. Listening becomes natural. This listening does not require effort. It requires availability. Availability is the heart of detachment. Available to joy without clinging. Available to pain without resistance. Available to change without fear. Fear fades because nothing is being defended. Defense once seemed necessary to survive. Now awareness trusts its resilience. Resilience is not toughness. It is adaptability. Adaptability keeps the heart open. Open hearts engage fully. Engagement without fear feels alive. Life regains immediacy. Moments are not rushed. They are received. Receiving does not accumulate, it releases. This rhythm of receiving and releasing is natural. It mirrors breathing. Inhale, exhale. Holding breath creates distress. Letting breath flow sustains life. Detachment allows life to breathe. Breathing life feels supportive rather than oppressive. This support does not guarantee comfort. It guarantees companionship. Awareness accompanies experience. You are no longer alone inside your own life. Loneliness often arises from separation created by resistance. Detachment reconnects. Connection does not depend on others' behavior. It depends on presence. Presence is always available. This availability is freedom. Freedom is not escape. It is intimacy without entanglement. Entanglement creates suffering. Intimacy nourishes. Nourished awareness remains steady. Steady awareness does not cling to outcomes. Outcomes come and go. Meaning remains. Meaning is found in how life is met. Meeting life fully is peace. Peace here is not final. It is ongoing. It renews each moment. Awareness chooses not to interfere. This choice becomes effortless, not because effort disappears, but because resistance does. What is meant for you arrives when conditions align, not because you waited passively, but because you did not block it with fear. Not everything arrives. Some things leave. Detachment makes room for both. Arrival and departure lose their dramatic charge. They are movements. Life moves. Awareness moves with it. This is the quiet freedom Buddhism points toward. No promise of perfect outcomes, no guarantee of comfort, only the assurance that when the mind stops fighting life, life reveals its natural intelligence. And in that intelligence, peace is not something to be achieved later. It is something that becomes available now.